Brock with us. Today, I'm very happy to have Steve Brock with us. I met Steve at the Glen in Seattle this past summer, and it was just one of those divine appointments where I was eating, Steve joined me, and the next thing you know, we were talking and we were just so on the same page. And I was just like, one day I hope that I'm able to have Steve come and join the Convergence community. I always say I'm interested in introducing Convergence to new artists or creatives, as well as creatives to our Convergence community. So, Steve, I want to welcome you. Thank you so much. It's so good to see you again. And so, this is just a conversation about who you are, about how your faith impacts what you do. And so, if you could just give us a snapshot into the life of Steve Brock, because that's what happened that day that really
Right.
where we connected. And so if you could just share who you are, what you do,
Okay.
and let's get started there.
All right. So the bigger picture thing, wife of 35 years, two boys, 130, 127. Oldest is a artist and creative or a graphic designer, lives in Santiago, Chile. Youngest is a film director or commercial director in LA. My day job is running a branding agency. So I work with folks like Microsoft and Walmart and Prudential, Safeco, and others on the corporate level. And then yeah, the majority, probably 70% of the work is with Christian nonprofits and some secular nonprofits as well. So worked with everyone from World Vision, Compassion, Crew, or Campus Crusade. So I always joke about like, we did the rebrand, the renaming of Campus Crusade to Crew. But I always say, if you like the change, you can thank me. But if you don't, there were so many other people. It was all their fault. It was all their fault. So yeah, just a ton of folks in that. So what has helped in that is, and why it connects to this conversation is a lot of the branding work is actually highly creative. It's more probably art and science. And when I say branding, I'm not talking just logo and tagline, but just that underlying meaning, the story that an entity wants to tell about itself or about its products or services. And so with that, we also do a lot of innovation work in terms of helping organizations improve their ability to innovate. So for example, we did an innovation challenge for Prudential. So 6,000 of Prudential's staff were invited, about 700 of them participated in an 8-week innovation challenge that we set up. So every week they had to start with kind of human-centered design. What is that? How do you go out and find what audiences want? And then you build a prototype, and then you kind of put it together. And the winner got $1 million from Prudential to fund their product, which ended up being an app that helps you round up, which at the time was more novel than it is now, but round up towards a savings account. So if you spend, $10.47, you can round it up to $11, and that extra money, don't ask me to do the math, will go to your savings account, that type of thing. So done that. And then on the personal side, in terms of creativity, wide variety. So been doing, gosh, going way back, was probably a woodworking and furniture design, photography, writing. So I've written not only a book we'll talk about today, but also last book was called Hidden Travel. And it was, and this will be something interesting. I would love to get your guys' feedback on this one. That one was a highly Christian book, but written for a secular audience. Okay, the most recent one on creativity that we'll talk about is actually written with Christian language for that. And there's always a challenge, right? There's always kind of a tension of how you do that, because there are things I need to find and say to a Christian audience that I can't talk about grace, and I can't talk about abiding with Jesus in secular terms, right? I can dance around some of the other stuff, but that's a thing. So in the writing, it's done that. I've written for, gosh, tons of folks. Probably the most notable would be written for like National Geographic and others in the travel space. And then writing after college and during high school, all through that, paid for college with performing magic. So I was a magician. And so it's funny because a lot of the illusion design work, which is what I actually enjoyed more than the performing, it's starting to show up. So I have a novel in process that is using all that background. So nothing is wasted, right?
That's it.
Um, so yeah, other interests, music, cooking, travel, all these different things, but gives you some idea of kind of me. Is that
That's a
enough?
lot. That's a
That's a lot.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you incorporate all of this into, your actual everyday life?
So that's a great question. And one of the things okay, so I'm going to just talk about it because I'm going to be referring to it. So here's
Yeah.
the book. It comes out in January. It's called The Creative Wild. How to Get Unstuck, Create More Adventurously. And the reason for the title, the subtitle there, is because it was originally written as a part two to Hidden Travel. In fact, it was originally called Hidden Creativity or the Hidden Creative or something like that. What I realized is, yes, there are a Venn diagram overlap of people who are creative and people who travel, but they are also, there's a lot of people that don't travel that are creative, et cetera, et cetera. So it came down to that. And so one of the things in the book that to me has been one of the most helpful things in the research for the book is this idea of what I call energy modes. And it's, instead of managing your time, it's by David Kadavi, is a writer who wrote a book called Mind Management, Not Time Management.
Mm,
Okay, secular book, but really good one, because he gets into this idea that if you can manage your energy, it's not about managing your time. So for example, yes, I have a lot of control since I run my own company. I can set my own hours for the most
right.
part. So that definitely helps, right? I understand the privilege, if you will, of doing that. But I've also learned to organize my time based upon my energy. And so we talk about different types of energy. There's a different type of energy for generative type of creativity, right? Which is different than editing type of or refining creativity, which
Hmm.
is different than researching creativity, which is different than synthesis creativity, right? We all know those, whether you're a painter, a sculptor, a writer, whatever, you know that there's a different thing than like on painting when you're trying to figure out composition, right? That's more sometimes analytical, sometimes just intuitive, but there's a different thing than when you're in kind of flow zone of doing actual applying the paint there and things like that. So
Right.
finding those modes of energy and what time of day is best for you. You can't always control it, but
Right.
I've definitely found this, that I have now shifted my timing. So first thing in the morning, and science, the neuroscience behind this supports it, that our prefrontal cortex, which is the more critic voice of our brains, it's still asleep, right? When you're first getting up, it's got the snooze button on for a couple more hours, or at least another hour. So if I can just literally sometimes even in bed, if my wife has gotten up, I'll stay in bed with and type or write by hand, do morning pages. You guys probably know that, Julia Cameron's thing. All right, and whatever it is, but it's a different feel because it's using a different energy mode. And if I try to wait until later in the day, I will lose that.
Yes.
Now, I
Yeah.
used to, yeah, and this is another cool thing about it is I used to think is, oh, okay, I should start off with prayer. But the thing about it is prayer I can do in a different energy mode. I don't
Hmm.
have to be as, creative in terms of my prayer time. So I'll do the writing, the generative writing during that first hour or two, then prayer, and then like go to the gym, exercise. And then the rest of the day, I've got a head start on everything else. Now, if I have a window of opportunity, normally in the afternoons, I'm kind of, zonked creatively. But if, for example, I've got like 3 hour meeting scheduled and that meeting gets canceled, I can be opportunistic about that and say, is like, okay, it doesn't normally fit my energy mode, but it doesn't matter. I'm excited just to have this little thing,
Have
and
the free
that's enough
time.
to
Right.
give me, yeah, yeah. So you
Yeah.
get a sense of that.
Oh, that's
So,
nice. That's good. That's
yeah.
good. So, what tell us, I know the book comes out in January, right?
Mhm. Right.
But did I hear you say you're working on a novel now?
Oh
You
yeah, so
um,
when I was writing Hidden Travel, I started a novel because I was kind of stuck, right? And so that's one of the key themes in the creative book is on how do you get unstuck? Well, one of the best ways to do it is to shift your focus, right? Because the key to getting unstuck is never getting stuck in the first place.
right.
And the key to getting stuck or keeping that is
Um,
keeping, right, is keeping momentum. So I've heard of people that even will do this. If they're feeling like they're stuck writing or something and they're having just kind of a mental block, they will literally just be doodling with their hand, just so that there is some physical movement going on. So you're not feeling just like, because as many you start to get that mode of just like feeling stuck, it can cascade. So on the more macro level, the writing the novel was, okay, I'm feeling like I don't know where I'm going with the travel book. So let me shift over so I can keep writing, even if
Hmm.
it's not on the travel project. And that, of course, opened the door for that one, put the novel on hold, and now we'll come back to that after that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I find that that's how I operate too. It's just my husband's here and I am just constantly moving in and out,
Hmm.
doing different things. And he probably thinks that, oh my gosh, her ADD or whatever is
Right,
just
right.
so, and it's not that. It's like I'm literally being charged, like constantly recharged. Like the idea of getting stuck for me, I may get stuck if I'm writing a song or working on something, but it's I'm not stuck. It's almost like I need to just like my body is just craving more and that creativity. There's another way for me to direct my this creativity that's going on
Hmm.
inside. And so that's I love this energy management.
Yeah, yeah. No, and on that, both the energy management, but the unstuck, the other key to me that's been most helpful on getting unstuck is the realization that it's kind of like trauma or all sorts of terms that have become almost like a meme in
Mm,
today's world, where it's like you hear about everyone having writer's block. So all of a sudden you think, oh my gosh, I don't know what to write on this page. I must have writer's block, right? So we
right.
psych ourselves out with these different things. Like Kevin Ashton, who wrote a great book called How to Fly a Horse. And it's also a book on the neuroscience behind it, behind creativity. And he said, is like, it's not writers. You're not, no one suffers from writer's block.
Right.
They suffer from writing a bestseller block, right?
Yes.
It's technically like perfectionism that gets in the way. And the other
Yeah.
thing I would say spiritually is that, mm, speaking for me, but I know for some others as well, is we're not good at patience and this
Mm,
idea of waiting on the Lord. So a lot of times writer's block is not a block. It's God saying, wait, hold on, wait a second here, take a step. So a lot of things we think of being like blocks are kind of detours to something better, right?
yeah.
And a lot of it is also just how we think about it. So you can get stuck on the small project level, you get stuck on big career level, but in most cases, there are times to wait. But there's this thing that I learned a long time ago from one of our clients about active waiting. You guys
Hmm.
probably, right? That you're
Hmm.
not just sitting on your hands during a time when things feel like they're not moving forward. You just do exactly what you said, Adrian. You shift over to something else. So you're still waiting and you're not trying to outrun God, right?
That's
Or
right.
as we talk about, one thing with our clients, we always say is we never want to outmarket God in any of
Mm,
the work that we do, meaning that we know we have the marketing and branding techniques to manipulate people towards different outcomes. I mean, look at
mm,
technology that they know really well, Facebook and others, how to use these tools to get us to do certain things. So we never want to do that.
right.
But there are times when you do need to shift and wait for God to kind of move on this area, but you can still keep going in this other area.
Wow. So this new book is basically a sequel to your travel. Uh,
It's, yeah, not real. You don't have to have read the first to have read.
okay.
So when I think sequel, I think
Yeah.
A leads to B, right? But it's just a follow-up. So that this idea of creating adventurously, which is one of the key themes in there, that's a carryover from the other one, which is just I talk about you can be an adventurous creative or a creative adventurer. So a creative adventurer is someone that in the travel book is someone who takes your interest, whatever they are, okay, your passions and hobbies, you could even say, and you learn how to apply those on a trip. So you actually
Mhm.
elevate the experience of any trip by incorporating your creative interest on that. So it could be like, I mean, I know if one person I interviewed, this seems like a interesting hobby. they love like roller coasters. So they have built their trip around finding roller coaster around the world. And the thing about it is he goes, okay, that's a nice little hobby, but it's not that. What they've discovered are these other aficionados of roller coaster. They have this entire community now that they formed
Right.
that he's met in person. So that idea of taking your creative work and seeing almost a trip or travel, not as an end of itself. And sometimes
Yes.
I'm the first to love just travel for its own sake, but I love it even more when I'm traveling for the purpose of achieving some sort of creative activity. So for me, a lot of times that's photography. Like my son at one point, being a kid and being so tired of dad always just taking pictures, said, Dad, like, couldn't you enjoy the trip more without a camera? Right. And it's like, no, not really, because it's not like, the thing a lot of people say is, well, you're not really experiencing it because you're seeing it through, the viewfinder type of thing. And I think to me, the negative would be the selfie, because they're not even looking at the scene. They're looking at themselves with the scene behind them, usually, as you're holding it. But this is different because you're actually seeing, it's like the same thing why I love sketching. You see the place better. You actually get to know the place better. It means you have to slow down to do it. But the point of it is, I enjoy a place more when I can interact, that there's some sort of creative activity going on at the same time as I'm understanding the culture and learning the language and meeting the people, all of that. It all works
It
together.
all works.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, why don't we get into this new book of yours, The Creative Wild. And I want everyone to know it's coming out in January. I thought it was coming out in October, Steve, but
It was originally, but
I,
publisher had other, yeah, ideas.
I'm looking forward to it. So, uh, why don't you talk about the the actual the book itself, and like what are some of the highlights that you'd like to share with us, because I know a bit about it, but
Mhm.
Convergence doesn't. So
Sure.
why don't you talk to us about what would you say is the highlight for you for this particular book, and what are you hoping that this book accomplishes? You touched on it a bit, but
Yeah, that has actually shifted because, so, right, I'm in marketing and branding, so I'm always thinking in terms of target audience and all that type of thing. The original target audience was people like us, right, that are already aware of their creativity, and they want tips, tools, and techniques to improve that experience so that you avoid the downsides of it and you increase the upsides of it. And that's still part of the book. Okay. And that's part of the create adventurously theme is, if you're doing it, how do you do it with that spirit of adventure? And I've had, gosh, I don't know, several people that have read the, advanced reader copy of it, who have just said, and I hate to use this term because it's so overused, but it literally for them was life changing in the sense of they embrace that sense of adventure,
yeah,
even though they don't think of themselves as adventurous
yeah,
people, right?
right.
And it becomes a part of their identity. So that was original audience. But what I found is actually a bigger audience for this book. It's
That's
people who do not think of themselves as creative, but deep down in their hearts wish they did. Okay.
mm,
And so what I'm finding, if I were to summarize it now, I would say it is for helping every single person. I believe God has placed some deep longing in their heart to make something. It could be a project, a work of art, a new business, a life, right? A family, all these different things. But this idea of making, because we're created in the image of a creative God, it's there. It's part of our DNA,
it is
right?
part of our DNA.
Yeah. And so I had one guy after a presentation on this, he came up and he said, "Oh, they're so good." I said, "Well, tell me what you liked about the presentation." Because, right. And he said, uh, and I'm using this quote now. He said, since we're created in the image of a creator God, then when I am not creating, something really vital in my life is missing,
Missing.
you know?
That's beautiful.
And so what I'm finding now, it is for those people as much to simply say, when I'll have the conversations, they say, I'm not creative. And I'll say, tell me about what you do. And they'll say, I'm a teacher. And I said, oh, so you just take the curriculum, right? And you just use it exactly as it is. And they'll say, no, I do my own lesson plan. I'll decorate the class. I know each kid's needs and stuff like that. And here's where I'm finding it in the book. I talk about this idea of people have the wrong labels. That's a big part of the problem in terms of even people I know who are full-time artists. A lot of them do not like to use that term, right?
Mm,
Or people who are doing very creative work, they don't like to use the term creative, in part because there's a million types of creativity, right? But there's two kind of general categories. We'll call them compositional creativity, which is, Beethoven writes a composition, or you write a novel, you write a poem, whatever it is, you're composing something. That's what most people think of when you use the word creative, right? But the thing is, probably, I'm guessing 90% of all creativity is this other type called improvisational creativity, right? If you find, say your phone is not working, so you can't rely on Google Maps or Waze or whatever, and you have to find a new way of getting home in traffic, that is improvisational creativity. Figuring out how to get your kids to school on time if something comes along and change. All these forms of creativity happen every single day for every single one of us, but we don't label them as creativity. Okay. And when people start to realize that they have that ability, it starts to shift their identity. And they start to say, it's like, okay, I may not still be comfortable calling myself a creative, but I know I have the ability to create. And
mm,
that has become a big thing. And so tied to that becomes another theme of the book is this idea of creating as an act of grace. And this applies to whether you're a full-time artist, creative, or not. It's this idea that if we see our abilities as a gift from God, then we have, right, the parable of the talents. We have some responsibility to do
yes.
something with that. And when we do, and we don't do it alone, okay, that's a whole another thing is this idea of abiding with Jesus in the creative process. And let me sidetrack on that for a second. One of the things that I've discovered in conversations with people for decades now is we, particularly Christians, are really good at inviting God into our pain and our suffering. We're not really good at inviting God into our joy.
Mm,
Because it's like, why should we? Right? It's like joy, that's easy. I'm feeling good. Why do I need to rely on God when things are going really well? But the thing about it is, and we know this as creatives, is when you do that, when you
yes.
invite God into the joy, that becomes, I mean, literally mind boggling in terms of
Right.
what is, because you start to realize that the creativity itself is not the goal, right?
Right.
It's just an end to this idea of drawing closer to God. But when you're drawing closer to God in an act of enjoyment,
Yes.
all the garbage that we have built up in our lives, right? For me, like the legalism that I'm still working through, you start to realize, like, oh gosh, God really is good. And I can experience God's goodness in a whole new way that helps me to build that faith muscle so that when I'm starting to question God's goodness or whatever, then it kicks in and says, okay, Jesus, let's get back to this thing of making together. Okay? So the last part of creating as an act of grace is a sense of when you see it as an act of grace, you take it as a gift, you do your best with it, you create along with God, and then you gift it to others. So even for me, like in my professional work where I'm getting paid for doing the work, if I see my audience as beneficiaries of a gift that I am giving to them, it not completely, right? We're all insecure, a bunch of messed up people, right? But it certainly helps to overcome all this sense of, oh, are they going to like the work that I'm doing?
Right.
Are they going
Right.
to like me because of the work I'm doing? You don't have to. When you give it as a gift, like you kind of let go of that.
You let go of it. Right.
Yeah. And you have this safety net of, okay, even if they don't, I still got Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going back to creating adventurously. So
What a
it's
win-win
kind of,
situation.
yeah, yeah. So to
Beautiful.
me, it is a virtual spiral upward rather than a downward type.
Yes. That's beautiful. Wow. Well, let me I want to share because I want to talk about your creative boxes here.
Hmm. Okay, as you're bringing that up, let me explain what these are. So
Okay.
we've talked a little. Here's how the book's structured. So the first part is just the more the theology of creating as an act of grace, my own kind of journey through my own kind of limiting beliefs. Two limiting beliefs that I have. See if this sounds familiar to anybody. That creating has to have a purpose to it, that creating for its own sake is no good. And that purpose better involve others, because if it's not, you're a pretty selfish person. Okay.
Mm.
Sound familiar to anybody? Okay. So what I've come to learn through this process is um, this question. Okay, why did God create the world? And you can say, theologians will tell you, well, most of the answers tend toward, well, he wanted fellowship and you want people to be in relationship with. And it's like, well, wait a second. We're Trinitarian in our belief as Christians. That's a triune God. God had complete fellowship within the Godhead for eternity. He doesn't need us for relationship. Now, I do suspect that relationship is a part of the answer, but maybe, just maybe, the bigger part of the answer is because creativity is good, right? Because there's something valuable about it, and that's good in and of itself. The second
Mm.
part of the limiting belief was this idea that it has to be for others. So there's a study that was done, I think it was probably maybe 2021. And it was on people who have had what they call a winning streak, meaning they've had, a long run of success. So Steve Jobs comes to mind as a great example of that. Or going back to like the 1940s with Jackson Pollock as the most famous artist in America at the time. Well, they did the research and said, okay, is it because of their talent? Nope. Is it their education? Nope. Is it the diversity of the things that they did? Nope. Is it the length of time they've done it? Nope. None of the obvious things led towards these winning streaks or hot streaks. The thing that was three little words that they summed it up: explore, then exploit. Every single one of these people spent years in the wilderness just not knowing what they were doing. They were trying all sorts of things. They were experimenting with all sorts of stuff. They were not landing on anything. They had no success. Even Steve Jobs, right? He's kicked out of his own company for a while and all this stuff. But then when they find the one thing, they go deep on it and they hammer it and they become really, really good at that. Okay. So here's the point theologically is it may seem like you're doing something that's totally selfish just for you. And it could be for years that no one ever sees your creative work at all. But you don't know the end of the story. Okay. You do not know what God is going to do with that. And you do not know if that is simply this period of exploration that, 10, 20, 30 years from now could end up being something more. So another aspect of this, we talked about creating as an act of grace, but it's also creating as an act of faith, trusting God to complete in us, through us, with us, what only he can do. And to say is like, okay, I don't have to worry about the outcomes. So before this, Lisa, you were mentioning about this idea of like, it's not about the product, right? It's about the process. And that's exactly it, is because we can trust God with the process or with the product, because that could be a long time. So anyway, all those things, that's first part of the book. Second part of the book, on the 4 essentials you need to create: mastery, got to know your stuff, got to work on it. You can't just, I have respect for conceptual art, but I have a whole lot more appreciation and value for art that has a craft behind it as well. Okay. Mastery matters, but mastery is a spectrum, it is not a state, right? So just getting better. Do not compare yourself to, people 20 years down the road from you. Okay. Mastery, mindset. I'll come back to mindset. Motivation, right? You got to have motivation. All the research will show you that the people that are best are the people that just love what they do. Okay. And so motivation is huge. And then last one is environment. You need a supportive environment. And those 4 show up in research that was done by Harvard on corporate innovation, but it also applies to us. And so this is why what Convergence is doing, this is part of the supportive environment. You need a tribe. You need people, because it's an ugly world out there for artists, and it's uglier world for creative Christian artists, because you do not have support from the church usually, and you do not have support from the artistic community, because this one's going to think you're kind of a wacko for believing in any type of, God thing. And this one's going to think you're a wacko because you're doing things that aren't, by the rules and stuff. So you need each other. We need each other. All right, for that. That's the second part of the book: mastery, mindset, motivation, environment. The last major part of the book is on these tools for creating adventurously. There's 11 of them. And what each of these boxes was created for was as a reflection of my own creative interests that we talked about earlier. But they also get into and introduce the concepts that are represented by those tools. So this tool is, I believe, the tool on incompletion, meaning that you all are creative people, and the research, do not ask me to pronounce his name, Csikszentmihalyi. Okay, the Romanian, we all, right, wrote the book on flow. Anyway, he also did the research years ago that showed that creative people are different, they're wired different. They handle paradox and they handle ambiguity better than the general population. So this chapter on incompletion is saying sometimes the best thing you can do to complete a work well is to leave it incomplete, right? And particularly as a writer, I'll just give you that example, or as a musician. You leave, right? Imagine if in a thriller or a mystery novel that you wrapped up and completed each chapter with, you know, a nice, neat, tidy little mini conclusion there. No one would read the book, right? We need incompletion to keep us moving through it. We like to have this not knowing. And the biggest thing of it is, even as a visual artist, I mean, this is where you can go back to the Renaissance and you start seeing people do this, but particularly like with Impressionism, you have to rely on the viewer to complete the picture in their own mind. Okay, so you leave it incomplete, right? We're not filling in all the blanks for them, because what that does is that actually increases the joy of the experience, because they're now contributing to the overall experience. So incompletion, we all want closure. We think we want closure, but what we really want is actually a better experience, and incompletion is one. So the magic was just part of that. So all these are just, you can, you know, go through, but just so you know that, like, the music was the chapter on rhythm. So rhythm is tool. That's the energy modes type of a thing, finding your own pace, your own cadence, not, you know, getting caught up in other people's ones like that. Photography, I think this photography was on perspective. And the idea of, one of the ideas in the book is this, the closest thing I know of as a superpower that we as creatives have is reframing. Think about it. Reframing allows you to change. It's like magic, right? Because as you can look at any situation and see it from a different perspective, and everything changes. So it's kind of the same thing with photography. Get that different angle and everything changes. Woodworking. I can't remember exactly which chapter this one. It may have been on the chapter. Oh, it is. It's on the last chapter on rightness, and knowing when your project is done and when it is right. And the idea with rightness here is, there's a line in boat building where they say that you can measure out the curvature, like, of the staves that you're putting on the side of a boat, the laps and stuff. But the phrase is, if it looks fair, it is fair. Meaning that if you developed your senses of balance and proportion well enough, if it looks good, it is good. Now, the flip side of that is in woodworking, if, like, on the apron of a desk, so to speak, you know, where there may be like a curvature on the front underneath of, like, the top of it. If you cut that curve too shallow, it doesn't look like a subtle curve. It looks like a straight line cut poorly. Okay. So there's all these little principles of perception and rightness that come in with this as well. This is sketching and drawing, and this one was, I think, oh gosh, I can't remember which chapter this goes with, but that's all right. It was just the idea of, maybe this one's on indirection, and how sometimes you get to the solution best in an indirect manner. And the reason for this is, you know, a lot of creativity, particularly in business, is problem solving. But there's a line in the book that has generated at first some kind of like questions, and then people goes, oh my gosh, you're right. The line is this, is ideation without execution is merely daydreaming. Right? Because I really believe that you can be a great idea person, but if you're not doing anything with that, it's no different than just kind of a fantasy, right? And so what you learn in the visual arts is you can think of it and you can learn to see better, but if you're not actually doing something with it, and sometimes the thing, this indirection is the best thing you can do, is the indirect way. So in ideation, we talk about it with you guys all know about like convergent versus divergent thinking. So divergent thinking is you come at the answer by thinking about all the other things. Like in our brand work, a lot of times we'll ask the question is, okay, what would you as an organization never do? Okay. And by getting to what you would never do, you sometimes have the answer for what you should do, right? Or what can we learn from? That's another great question. Is we do this all the time. What can you learn from Disney and how they organize people to go through lines? What can we learn from the Marines in terms of boot camp? What can we learn from Starbucks in terms of how they train their baristas, right? All these different things you take from indirect sources, and talk about getting stuck or unstuck. You've got this wealth of things. Literally last night, we're at a friend's house and he's a musician and he has bought all these old like Yamaha organs, like the electric, they're cross between, and they sound like a real organ, but they're more like a synthesizer. And it was so cool because I'm playing some of the stuff, just a simple little, made up theme there. And when he changes the instrument that it's played with, it has a completely different feel that I would never have known if I just gone in a direct manner composing on the piano alone, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
all right, enough of the tools. Travel, that's discovery. You get a sense of those.
Yep. Yep. Hold on. Let me get back. Wow.
They're still here. Amazing.
This is great. This is great. I'm always interested in hearing too from our Convergence community. I'd like to just open this up this because this has just been really just exciting as I knew it would be. But Convergence, is there anyone who has any questions for Steve? I know this was a lot, but I mean, a lot of real good stuff here. Um, Anyone have any questions that would like to ask? Now would be the time. No one has any questions.
Well, Steve, you were well, there's so much that I would love to talk with you about actually, and so much parallel thinking. You mentioned motivation as one of the key pillars there for your book, and this season of the podcast, we're looking at what motivates us as creative people, understanding that obviously all artists are not alike at all. We're very, very unique individuals with lots of different reasons for why we do things and why we create. And so one of the things that we're looking at is talking to people about how you create a path for your career, a path for your calling, and not looking at somebody else's definition of success, but starting by looking at, why do you create to begin with? What is it about the creative process that is exciting to you, so that you don't get stuck in feeling like you have to get on a particular treadmill to look like you're successful, but to really be able to look at your motivations for why you create as a way to get there. And so you have created a very interesting and unique path for yourself with the ways that you make a living in the world and the ways that you explore your creativity. And you were talking about motivation. So I just was wondering if you had some thoughts on, that making your way in the world as a creative person and balancing that, like making a living versus fulfilling your calling part of it, and what motivation has to do with that for you.
Yeah, so a couple thoughts on that. So that I talk about those things as creative tools, and there's a reason for that. A key theme in the book is tools, not rules. Because next to perfectionism, I believe that the thing that just kind of sinks most of us creatively or just hinders us are what I will call just bad advice. And it's not bad in the sense of it's wrong. It's just wrong for you or me at a particular time. Okay. And so one of those for me that killed me for a long time was that, oh, if you're going to be a writer, then you have to forego every other form of creativity because you have to just give your heart and mind and soul to the craft of writing. And then this is only a couple of years ago in the research that I found that actually only 20% of creatives are singular focused in their activities. 65% of us function better when we have multiple creative interests going on. Okay. Was that a question? At least you're on mute, or oh, okay. And so that's one thing to think about. And so what that leads to is this idea of calling and stuff like that. I believe part of that bad advice is this, that we have to monetize everything. Okay. If you want to be successful as a creative person, you better monetize it, or else it's not. I go back to the book. One of my favorite books is Oz Guinness's book, The Call. If you're interested in anything around calling, read that book. It's an old book. It's like the 1990s or something. But he has a line in there where he's quoting G.K. Chesterton, who is talking about the word amateur. Comes from the Latin amare, meaning to love. And he says this, an amateur is a person who loves what they do. And so his little quip on that, ooh, puberty's going on here. Anyway, his quip is that anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. Okay. Meaning that if you love it enough, you're going to do it, whether you can do it well or not. Okay. And that idea flies in the face of so much advice today, which simply says, no, you've got to monetize. You've got to get really good. You got to sell it. And if you're not good, you got to figure out a way to sell it. And I do not see that. I see that as a pathway for some people. And again, another theme of the book, find what works for you, right? Because we're all going to have different responses. We're all going to have different things. But so I mentioned like the woodworking. And I mean, I've sold furniture for several $1,000s. And you know what? I hated it, all of it. Hated it because it took all the joy out of that creative area for me. And so for me, my way of doing it is I would rather fund these more creative things, some of which I will never show to anybody else, by doing a job that happens to be creative. But there's a lot of people who they completely give up on the day job because they think it's like, no, I am not successful by my definition if I'm not doing my full-time job, doing what I love as a passion. And I just don't. And honestly, with AI, kiss that notion goodbye even further. There's going to be more, and it's going to be harder and harder, speaking as a writer, for example, for writers to make a living in a lot of ways, the way that they have in the last, say, 10, 15, 20 years, because AI, I don't know if I will write another nonfiction book, because AI can probably pull research better than I can to pull together just kind of a self-help type of book. But what it means is that, back to like writing the novel, then it gives us more opportunities. But the whole point of it is, don't get caught up in this idea that you have to monetize your creativity all the time. If you can, awesome. It is a great metric for knowing that you're doing something well. I totally encourage you to do that. But like the phrase in the book is, love your work like an amateur, do your work like a professional, even if you're not getting paid for it. Okay. Take the professional levels of competency, mastery, excellence, and apply them. But don't get caught up in the idea that you're not good enough if you're not monetizing it or you're not making a living off of it.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Steve, thank you so much. It appears that you're one of the lifelong learner types, and a Renaissance kind of guy, kind of person. At what point do you feel like, okay, you've super saturated yourself in learning and new things and all that, and you just have to start to go into a season of pouring out, and don't pick up another book? Or are you doing it all the time as you go along in many, many different ways?
It's a great question. So back to the explore then exploit would kind of imply that exactly you reach that point of the exploration. Now it's time to exploit. But I mentioned like Jackson Pollock. Yeah, he rode that wave. But honestly, it was 4 years of his life that he was in the explore mode. And then he gave the things we know, the thing we know of him best for, bad English, but you know what I'm saying, is the drip paintings. He completely, in 1944, 45, walked away from that completely and went back into the learning and the exploration. So I think it's seasonal. That's the whole idea of, you have rhythms that are daily, hour by hour rhythms. You have seasons of life too that are also doing that. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer on that one. I think it can be either. If you're a lifelong learner, if you're committed to learning, you cannot not learn.
Right.
Right? You can try to shut it off, but your curiosity is always going to do it. I don't think, here's the other thing. I reject the either or in almost every single case, because the both and says, it doesn't mean I have to completely cut out learning. If I'm going deep diving on something, I can just cut back how much time I'm spending on the learning part. Doesn't mean I have to give it up though. So I think you can do both. I don't want to say it's one or the other, because I think you can do both.
Steve, you're on mute.
I thank you for the answer. I receive it. It's really a great answer because it applies to everybody, however they're set up, however they're made, however their makeup is.
Yeah. And that honestly, that has been the freeing thing. You guys are going to hate this, but I'll tell you anyway. Two things that have been life kind of philosophies of mine have changed in the writing of this book. Number one is like everyone has, we are more common, we have more in common than we think, and we are more unique than we think. Okay. There's paradox there. But honestly, the gospel is nothing but paradox, right? You got to lose your life in order to find all these different things. So that other one is, this is the one that may cause some issues, but it's like, I believe that no matter how sanctified, how holy, how spiritually mature anybody is, that deep down, every single one of us on this planet is a complete and total idiot in one way or another, right? We're just a bag of messed up stuff. But that's the cool thing about grace. That's why we need grace. So if we try to figure it all out and say, oh, now I have to go to this exploit mode, honestly, all you've done is just put a ton of pressure on yourself, as opposed to saying like, okay, Jesus, what are we going to do today? Surprise me, right? And then just kind of move into it and believe that the way you're wired is for a reason, right? I mean, we all know, here's the thing about everyone dances around like we have to be the moral police for people, but the fact is, you walk in faith for long enough of this Christian life, and you know what's right and wrong. Okay, you know what's biblical and what's not. And so I don't think we have to be like so worried about all the different things. So I actually, Karen, you're there. Are you the Karen that was on the podcast about talking about condemnation? Am I recognize the face? Okay, this is that. This is that issue, right? The whole issue of condemnation and our freedom not to have to give in to what other people are saying. But it doesn't mean you throw out morality. It doesn't mean you throw out, concerns for doing what is right. It's this idea of, again, it's not that there's a right or wrong one way to do things. It's a multiple path type of approach. So
Great.
I've really enjoyed this. This is great. Let me know when this gets published. I want to listen to again. It's great. I love the 20%. The 20% thing. I mean, very short. My grandmother told me when I tried to read her a poem, she knew I did art. She said, Karen, she wouldn't let me. She says, Karen, you can't do it all. You just have to choose one thing. All these years I've been sneaking around doing these other things on the side, thinking, well, Ma's right about everything. Well, she wasn't right about everything.
I'm telling you, if that one thing was the rule that literally messed me up for at least 10, 15 years, believing that, because I always did. I felt guilty about doing all the other stuff. And it's like, well, not just guilty, but I will never get good. I will never be a great writer if I'm dabbling in woodworking or art, photography or music or things like that. And now where I land on it now is like, you know what? I may never be a great writer, but that doesn't matter. I don't define myself as only a writer.
Right.
I'm far more satisfied and everything else doing all these other things, right? Like what's the Walt Whitman quote, right? So what if I contradict myself? I contain multitudes, right? So that's the way we all are.
That's great.
These writings I do, which I feel a little ashamed of, my big lie or my big tension is I know how to do good visual art, but I know I don't know how to do the other things I do. I know I'm not trained in writing. And so I've just consoled myself with "She Loves You, Yeah, Yeah, Yeah" as lyrics to a song. And though "She Loves You, Yeah, Yeah, Yeah" is not Emily Dickinson, it does work with the song. And then sometimes my art has a she loves you, yeah with it, you know. So that's how I've
Exactly.
allowed myself to get away with it.
I'm with you. I'm
Lyrics.
totally with you. I mean, I'm the exact opposite. That's why I don't show like my drawings or paintings too often, is because it's like, yeah, it's like a child could do that, but it's like, no, yeah, just own it. That's the big thing. Own it. It's good.
Yeah, just it's part of our expression and it's important.
Exactly.
Somehow,
That's great.
if there's a moment, it's going to be, I don't know. We'll stop. Oh, I'll stop.
No, but
Thank
yeah,
you.
it's like,
That's great. You're wonderful.
thank you. Thank you.
Any
Right.
other questions?
It's not a question. It's just appreciation. Thank you so much for answering a lot of my yeah, the doubt and the block that that I have all this time, especially when you talk about the energy and describe different kinds of energy. I immediately I realized I can kind of understand myself better. Like I like to write in bed, and when it's dark. So early morning and late night is the best time for me to write. And I'm a stay-home mom. I homeschool, so during the day when there's sunlight, I cannot write. Yeah,
Right.
I just always struggle with that. How come I don't use the best time to write? But the best time actually is the time is that leftover time. That's the best time for me. I can concentrate when I don't feel pressure to take care of other things. Yeah.
Yes.
And so during the day, people's best time is the time for me to sketch much. I enjoy my backyard and to sketch the flower in my yard with my boys. Yeah, I kind of feel that works, but today you explained. So yeah, it's aha moment for me. Thank you so
Well,
much.
oh, you're welcome. And don't you feel, I mean, physically feel, it's almost like a
Yeah,
different part of your head when you're sketching
yeah,
than when you're
yeah,
trying to write and
yeah.
stuff.
And sometimes I try to reason it and do it opposite,
Yeah.
but always fail.
Yeah.
Always feel so not right. Yeah. So yeah, thank you
No,
so
that
much.
was, you know, you're welcome. And to me, all this leads back to it, right? Everything. Um, we had a client once, and their kind of brand identity was this idea of freedom from, freedom to. And I've always loved that phrase because
Mhm.
it is like a freedom from all
Yes.
these lies, right? All these things, which they're lies for you. They may work really well for someone else, but for you, they are a lie. And it's a freedom to finding your own way to do it. And again, it's not this bohemian sense of like free fall and doing everything that you want, just whatever feels good, do it. It's like, no, that's all within this kind of moral will of God to be able, you've got all this vast territory that you can do. It's part of it is just giving yourself that sense of freedom that you can do that, and it's okay to do that, you know?
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
Well,
And I want to let you know that actually before today's meeting, I actually already prepared my question. Question for you, you already answered, but I just want to let you know how important it is for you to talk about this. My question for you is, I want to know if you ever have a desire or need to have a focus, but you already pretty answered. Thank you. Yeah.
oh yeah. And
Yeah.
but the thing about it is you can have multiple foci, right? You can have
Yeah.
at different times, different seasons. I'm not saying being, you know, Adrian, you said it's like with like what your husband thinks. It's like you're not ADD, right? You're not all over the map.
right.
You do got, so there's a thing in the book, stole it from Cal Newport as well as from David Kadavi, which is the idea of deep dives, Cal Newport's deep work concept of just arranging your life around the deep thoughts rather than trying to carve out a digital detox or something. And then Kadavi's point is what he calls minimal creative doses, which is like I do this with painting. I keep like our boys are gone, so one of their rooms I've made as a studio so that I have it all set up.
Right.
The painting, the watercolor, it's all
It's
set up.
there.
So if I have 5 minutes,
That's
right,
it.
between calls or something like that, it's a minimum creative dose that keeps
Yes.
me in the game,
Yes.
right? And keeps it fresh. If you let those things, whether it's writing or anything else, go too long, you have to start all over again every single
Yes.
time, right?
Yes.
But if you can just touch on it 2 to 15
Absolutely.
minutes a day,
Yes.
you will keep so much more momentum going there.
That's
So
it. That's it. So that's my life. It's like I'm on a perpetual just creative
yeah,
just, and it's so, to me, it's just so life-giving. Like, it is every day I wake up with this joy of like, wow, what am I going to be able to capture today? Whether it's, I never know, like, am I going to get that download for a song, but I'm constantly working and working, and just whether it's writing or music or art or, in the garden or what, it's so, it's revolutionary. It's revolutionary.
Well, and the thing about it is, okay, here's the theological last thought on you for you is, do you believe that God works in supernatural ways? Right? I mean, do you not just kind of intellectually
Right.
goes, yeah, he's God, so he has to. Do
Yeah.
you actually believe that
Yeah.
every single day? So the way we did it is like when our kids are younger, we practice a thing called a God hunt, which is you go out and you give,
Yes.
here's the rule. You give God the benefit of a doubt. So a quote unquote coincidence happens. And you don't just go, that's a coincidence. She goes, thank you, God. Right.
Right.
So you start practicing that every
Yes.
single day, saying, okay, oh, what are we doing now? What's this? Where is that going?
Yeah.
And you're right. It
And
increases
you
the
just
level
expect
of
it.
excitement. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a divine scavenger hunt every
Yes.
single day. Right?
Every day.
Yeah.
Every moment. Oh,
Yeah.
Steve, this was great. Thank you so, so much. It is 6 o'clock. Well, it's 6 o'clock my time. All right. I'm gonna ask, just if you guys could just hold on for 1 minute. My Steve, I would love it if you would pray for Steve before we leave. I would really appreciate that. We just want to bless you, Steve Brock, and thank you so much. And I'll make sure that when the book comes out, that Convergence knows about this. But Steve, would you offer a word of prayer and then close us out?
Sure.
Thanks.
Father God, thank you for this
No,
opportunity.
Steve, I want my Steve to pray for you.
Sorry. See, too many weird names. You got to have yeah.
I want
Sorry.
you to receive this blessing.
Yeah, there's that
Okay?
receiving thing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
want you to receive this.
All right. Sorry.
All right?
Okay.
Lord Jesus, we give you thank you for the life of Steve, how he has been able to respond to you, to both move in strength and confidence and sensitivity and creativity, both. That he's been able to embrace who you've said he is and all the many facets, as opposed to being captive to models that have been given him and given to so many of us that are quite limiting. We ask that in the season ahead, you platform him and his witness as never before. That there will be a double witness, first to the church for how to be in the world and yet not of it, to be missional translators and transposers of open-ended kingdom things that shows the church to re-embrace the mystery of God and to move away from a closed box reality. We ask for a greater platform within the church, and we ask for a wide open platform to reach people who are curious about things that are higher and beyond and deeper than ordinary reality. We know that you move in ordinary reality, but in supernatural ways. Lord, bless Steve with a fresh anointing of your spirit to empower him to make impact both in the church and beyond in ways that his capacity alone could never do by itself. Be a force multiplier, Lord Jesus, through your Holy Spirit. The love of the Father, Steve, be upon you, the grace of the Son, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit. And may people meet the Trinitarian God through you and your work. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you very
Amen.
much.
Welcome.
And Lisa, do you want to close us out? Or this is good?
This is a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you all for being with us tonight.
Yes. God bless you all. Thank you so much. And Steve, I look forward to connecting in the near future.
Sounds good. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Great.
All right.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Let freedom ring.
Yeah.